Welcome to this edition of Backstage Pass with Leah Chang. I'm your host, Leah Chang. Today I'm sitting down with my good friend Michi Barall to talk about drawing lessons, her new play that is being produced by, actually, it's a co-production of Mayi Theater and Children's Theater and in South Minneapolis.
I mean, yeah, it really is a story, I think, about Mayi and Mayi's ability to really build partnerships with other theaters and really to help to showcase the work of Asian American writers. Ralph has really been an amazing advocate.
Now, I didn't see you on the website, but weren't you one of the original Labbies?
I was, yeah.
Can you tell me about how that started and what that program was about?
Oh, who was it who started the program?
Sung?
Was it Sung?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I was in it a little bit later than when Sung was there. When I was there, I think it was before Rahana was running it. It was, I think, in the era of Lloyd really kind of running the program.
Okay.
And Kui was there. And it was really an incredible opportunity to hear the work of your peers and to get feedback. I remember Kui just being, at some point he had just had kids and he was like, this scene, like nothing is happening. he was like, I'm sorry, I am really tired, but like nothing is happening in the scene. And it was actually just so great because I think like I trusted him and I knew he like wasn't trying to like hurt me in any way. I knew that he was just like, I need something to happen, and I was like, okay. You know, it was sort of a slice of life scene, but it also was the kind of like talk that was not, that was really built out of an ethos of care. You know, it wasn't careful.
Sure.
But it was really like caring. It was really like, I want you to have a voice and to get your play out there. You know, I think all of us were so new to this idea that you could get your work on stage. And so it was just like a really exciting time. It's been so exciting to kind of see that cohort, like the whole cohort, like go out and just get produced everywhere.
Well, get produced everywhere and kind of take over the world.
Yes,
yay.
Exactly.
Be most produced playwrights of the year.
Mike and Rahana who are running it together.
Yeah. So let's talk about drawing lessons.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write it?
So there are two sources of inspiration, and the first one actually comes from the show that I did with Mayi, that kind of Ralph put together with director Jack Tamburri and Matt Park, who was a rock music adaptation of Gynt.
Right.
And we had so much fun working together. And so when we came out of that project, we were like, what are we going to do next? And
that's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
To have collaborators that you're really crazy for and you want to continue the fun.
Yeah, it felt like a sandbox. You know, it felt like we were really experimenting with form and like trying to figure out how to build stuff collaboratively. You know, it just was such a great experience. And so then Jack said, well, I've always wanted to see live drawing on stage. And the only reference I really had for that was William Kentridge's work. But I didn't really know entirely what that would mean. But at the same time, my daughter was like 4th grade, and she was reading all these middle grade graphic novels. And I was not ever really a person who read comics or much comic art. I was familiar with comic strips from the Sunday paper.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily even track those carefully. You know, I had ones that I liked more than others, but I think it was really astonishing to me that, you know, there was like a new book coming home from the school library every week. You know,
wow.
And there so many of them were telling these stories of like kids, girls, like in middle school, figuring out who they were. And there were a lot of Asian American writers. I remember when she read American Born Chinese, and I was like, this is an incredible book. You know? And it took me a lot of time to understand how graphic storytelling worked. Like, it was not intuitive for me, and I didn't want to read the books, really. but she would read them and then she would reread them and reread them. And so I started to really appreciate like how complex that interface is. So it's like text and storytelling and color and framing and all the things that are in comic art. And so I just thought, like, what if like we put these things together, live drawing and the whole vocabulary of the graphic novel, and particularly the middle grade graphic novel, which was like insanely popular. I was like, well, if we're looking for a show, particularly too, at that point Ralph was like, do you have anything for multi-generational audiences? And of course I didn't, but I was like, this could be that show.
Sure.
Because it would incorporate those. And then because I was really interested in like, how did these young women, or sort of women who were then in their 30s, know to become graphic novelists? I was like, what happened? That there's this like huge surge, right, of female graphic artists, female identifying graphic artists. And so I set the play in the 1990s to be able to kind of track like that development.
Oh,
like,
wow.
What kind of materials were they encountering? Who were they reading? What were their influences? And the beauty of putting a play in the 1990s too is there are no really, like, kids were not using cell phones, and kids also were not as helicoptered. So it meant that there was a lot of leeway in terms of like sending the kids out into the world on the play.
Sure.
And not having to sort of like deal with the, I mean, it's a little bit how I grew up also. It's just a little kind of free range. A little latchkey, a little free range. It was kind of benign neglect, right? But it meant that I felt like I had this passport all the time to the community. You know, really put me out in the community in a way that was a positive experience. I know it's not always a positive experience for everyone, but it was a positive experience for me.
Well, growing up in Canada, you must have been living in some place safe enough for you to be in that capacity.
Yeah.
Not like how we're living in New York right now.
Right. I was not, yes. Yeah. I had a lot of freedom. I was really walking to kindergarten on my own. Everybody did. And,
wow.
And it's that thing, right? Many people were looking out for you. But we would play hockey in the street. You know, it really was that. It was really nice. So it was nice to kind of remember a little bit of what that felt like, to have the freedom to make your own connections.
So it's a collaboration with Jack, but the comic artist's name is Blue. Can you tell me about Blue?
Yes, Blue is like a magic. So probably the most fun part of this whole process, aside from just sort of building the characters and living in the world, has been collaborating with Blue Delaquanti, who's a professor, teacher at M.F.A, which is the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and is literally right next to the theater.
Okay.
Which is so fun.
Well, that's so easy.
So easy. We actually got to interview a bunch of comic artists. There's so many, and we did sort of we did some kind of narrowing of the field by thinking, well, we want a voice and an image that really connects to our central character. So it was, but we got to look at a lot of different comic artists' website and pages that they had generated, books that they had written, and so Blue has an incredible ability to communicate like very difficult concepts in graphic art just simply and efficiently and with just such a beautiful line. Like it's so precise but also so energetic, and it's just been so much fun. I mean, there's some like really practical questions that I was able to ask Blue, like how long would you have to take to generate an image like this as a 12-year-old?
Right.
And so from a research perspective, having someone who was an informant, I read a lot of books like that were about comic art, and then I read a lot of comic artists talking about their process. But to be able to back and forth in real time ask Blue questions about their process, which I think we really wanted to put on stage. Like, what does a creative process look like, and how can you make that accessible to an audience?
So what is the play about?
So the play is about a 12-year-old Korean American girl growing up in South Minneapolis in the 1990s with a single dad, finding her voice as an artist and as a person. So she's introverted, kind of shy, and overwhelmed by school, and not a great student, which is something I really wanted to explore. Both putting someone at the center of a story who is not kind of talkative or extroverted,
Sure.
and also, having an Asian American character who is really struggling academically.
Sure.
Felt also like an important story to tell.
And real.
And real, exactly.
Very real.
Real, and in a way, a little bit contesting the model minority myth.
Of course.
Right. So, she finds her way into comic art, and she finds her voice as an artist as a way to tell her own story, which is a complex story of immigration, finding her own heritage in relationship to all the people who are around her, her friends and other people in the community, particularly this artist who works in a local art shop who is a comic strip artist.
Okay.
And so it was a way for me to kind of bring in comic strip art and also graphic
sort of
novel
in a
and
comparison.
and it kind of to talk about those two
mediums.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's about her, but it's also about Minneapolis, like that community.
Which has a very large, so she's Korean.
She's Korean. So actually the character was built, so I always think about actors when I think about characters. And I think at some point, this is an actor I've never met, Jack said, "Oh, I know someone who can draw. Her name is Kate." And so the character's name is Kate, because I sort of thought, oh, there's this actor who can draw. But she was in LA and wasn't available to be part of the developmental process. Mm-hmm. So we only have her name. But she's biracial, and so that the character is, there are variants within the script for the character either to be biracial or to be Korean American and
right.
not biracial.
But also, I also bring up Korean Americans.
Yeah.
Well, in Minneapolis, there's a very large population. There's a lot of Korean American adoptees.
Yes, yeah.
But also a lot of Hmong, a lot of
Yes.
Southeast Asians.
Yeah, so when I was thinking about the play, the reason she's Korean American is actually because the role of the dad was written for my friend Mac Park,
Okay.
who was part of the Peer Gynt collaboration. Mm-hmm. So that character is called Matt. And he grew up in Minneapolis, which was partially the setting of the play.
All right.
And so, but when I was thinking about that community, I did look a lot on Google Maps for neighborhoods where you would see overlap between immigrant communities. So there's a character who's Hmong American, Leah, whose name is Leah.
I saw that.
And
I never see my name spelled that way.
There you go, yay!
Except for me.
Actually, she's a little bit named for a person who's in a book by one of my favorite writers. And the book is called When the Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, M.F.A. And it's her kind of ethnography. It's often taught in medical school of Hmong, the interrelationship between the Hmong community in Merced, California, and the medical, and the sort of the medical institutional apparatus, in the sense that the Leah, this young person in the book whose life she follows has epilepsy, which is understood very differently, more through a shamanistic lens in the Hmong community than it is in the medical community. So it's sort of looking at medical cultures in that book. Anyway, it was just a book that I loved. And then I also was interested in thinking about the Somali American community. So Omar comes to Minneapolis sort of via London, although that's not really in the play so much anymore, and is also one of Kate's friends. So I wanted to represent, the diversity of Minneapolis, not just as it is today, but as it was in the 90s, and to track the ways that these kids find each other.
And have you had any other plays produced in Minneapolis before?
No,
or this is the first time?
This is the first time. Yeah.
So I'd like to know about the program Generation Now,
Yeah.
which is why this play came to be.
Yeah. So Generation Now is funded by the Mellon Foundation, and it specifically is a program to develop a repertoire of new plays representing underrepresented communities for multi-generational audiences. So it's a partnership between the Children's Theatre Company in Minneapolis and many small theaters like Miami who represent distinct communities. So there's Native Voices also involved, Penumbra is involved. So it's been actually an amazing opportunity to get to know the creative people who are part of those institutions and their writers, because part of what Generation Now has done has brought different artists from the different projects together in these kind of convenings where we talk about our work and our process and where we are. I had the opportunity to have people come and give me some notes just based on a reading, which was really, really helpful and wonderful, and just to hear and read their plays. So October 16th through 18 in Minneapolis, actually, there will be readings in conjunction with the production of the Other Generation Now commissions.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, the range of subjects, the range of types of plays that are being built is really big and really exciting.
What does it mean for you to be an Asian American theater maker in this time?
Oh, wow. I feel like it's an incredible time because there are so many people writing. So we don't have the weight, I think, that other earlier writers had to feel like they had to represent a specific experience with a particular kind of authenticity or lens, which is not to say that I don't care about authenticity. I do. And I've had a lot of informants, actually, and cultural consultants, because I am writing outside of my own community, and that's been humbling and really important and really a wonderful education for me too. I think so. For me, I think I'm just going to say this, as the mother of an Asian American daughter, I think I had a lot more hope that her life would be less constrained by representation than mine is or was. And I think I have a lot of disappointment about, I have both a ton of, I should start with, I have both a ton of appreciation and gratitude for the range of images that she gets to see.
Yes.
And films, Crazy Rich Asians, whatever it is. She's a huge K-pop stan. Just the fact that her, bedroom is full of posters, she's gonna hate me for saying this, of K-pop idols. It's just really, it's exhilarating.
And something that we didn't grow up with.
And we did not grow up with. So American Born Chinese on Disney Plus, whatever it is. There's so much out there now, everything, everywhere, all at once. I mean, I think there's a way in which she doesn't know. I think at some point she said, my favorite kind of book is written by an Asian American author about blah, blah, blah. And I'm just I just never had that, right? So it's really exciting. At the same time, I think about her going out into the world, I think about her going out into the street, and I feel like we have so much more work to do. And that understanding identity or identifying in community is one piece that's been incredibly important. But I feel that the work of kind of deconstructing where these representations come from, the persistence of stereotypes, really wanting to highlight the specificity of every individual's experience. I feel like that's work that we still have to do. And I'm grateful to be able to do it. And I'm grateful to be able to do it in the context of this community that has given me a life in the theater,
And a great deal of support.
An amazing amount of support as an actor, as a writer, in my studies. I feel immensely grateful to the generations that have come before us, and I also feel like we have more space to continue to kind of highlight the uniqueness of this experience. I feel very clearly that the umbrella that we all live under as Asian Americans is productive. You know, I've experienced a lot of community in that. I also am really aware of the tensions within it and the range.
Because it's not a monolith.
Because it is not a monolith.
Right.
And it's really important for us to acknowledge, right, the intersections that have to do with race, but also class and nation and history. But I do feel like I think about the contributions of Asian Americans to this country, both through legal pathways and also through arts and through sports and whatever it is. And I just think the richness of our experiences and what we have to say about what it means to be American is so important. It's so important, particularly because we are often
Otherized.
Right, made to feel foreign, right? And so what we have to say about what it means to identify as an American and to have to be a stakeholder in the future of this country. You know, as we see our first Asian American candidate for president, yes.
We want it. We want her.
Yeah, and I mean, I think her story too. You know, it's like this is a story of immigration, right? And people who worked incredibly hard, not just in their professions, but also towards advancing social justice for all, right? Which is, I think, one of the great arcs in the Asian American story.
So what do you hope, as you continue to develop this play, you said that you're going to be on a Zoom rehearsal today.
I know, yeah.
What do you hope audiences will take away from it?
So there are a lot of pieces to this that I want them to take away. I think Jack and I both really wanted, especially young people, to take away the feeling that anyone can draw. I think we often, particularly as Americans, have this idea that you're innately good at something. Oh, you're so talented at that, right? And I think we want two stories to come out of this. One is the story of you have a line, and that line is connected to who you are and what you have to say. And that line is meaningful and valuable. So there's that. And there's also this question of skills development, that so much of making art is about persistence. It's just sticking with it. It's having the courage to stick with it, and also just being able to like metabolize criticism, metabolize how hard it is to be an artist, metabolize like what it means to be in process and to have to revise continually and to have to, you know, rethink your toolbox or get new tools or whatever it is. Like we're all doing it all the time.
Sure.
So I think we really wanted to foreground that as an important part of being an artist and making a commitment to art, and the reward of being an artist too, right, is the process.
Well, that's everything.
Yeah, it's the everything of that. So those stories were, I think, foremost for me. And I also wanted both kids and grown-ups to come away with like some actual skills. Like, here are some actual things that you could learn to do that would help you draw.
Oh, so are there like going to be interactive things in the lobby?
Well, I think we will definitely do that, and probably Blue will be responsible for a little bit of that. There was a point in the middle of the play, it's gone now, where there was a kind of interactive experience, but now it's mostly in the form of exercises that Kate has to do, and we experience her creating or working through. Right. So my hope is that there would just be little tidbits for anyone who's thinking, how would I learn to draw? And I think a lot of the drawing has to do with ways of seeing, right? So can you see the world differently? And if you can see or apprehend the world differently, then that in some way also is part of being an artist and part of being someone who can render, right, an image that you can keep on a page. So. And then I guess the other thing that I really wanted to take away was the story too of like, school may not be for you. Like school, that the values, I've been in school my whole life, and mostly minus like 10 years. school is a space that I was able to navigate because I'm verbal and I love to read. You know, so I had like the two things. I was never good at math, but I had the two things that in the humanities could kind of get you through school.
Right.
But for a lot of kids, I think school feels really punitive. Like it's a space that you sort of have to survive. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to represent sort of the challenge and the pain of that in some way, and also to provide this kind of narrative that says that, you know, maybe you're not so good at school,
right,
but there are other ways that
for you to live
value.
in the world.
There are other forms of intelligence, you know? That this narrow definition of being able to take this test and do this thing, it's great, right? It's great, but it's also not everything. Mm-hmm. And that how we perceive the world, how we interface with it, how we are with other people, and what we can take in, that is life, right? That's really what's most important. Relationship is what's most important. I love the work of Hua Shu, who writes a lot for the New Yorker. There's a science writer, oh my gosh, his name, Ed Yong, who I feel like I started reading in the Atlantic during the pandemic, and I feel like he got me through the pandemic. And he's written a couple books, one on bacteria that I really love, but the other one that has to do with animal life, and it really kind of opened my mind to really this real question, right, of all of us experiencing things differently.
Sure.
You know, that we can all be in the same room, but if it's a fly or an elephant or whatever, it's going to experience like perceptual reality so differently, like a sensory world so differently. And so I feel like he was hugely influential for me when I was writing. But of course there are playwrights that I like. And you know, I think some of them are my friends. People like Lloyd, who I think is Asa, who's developing what I think of as kind of a chronicle of Asian American history.
I love his work.
So important and really wonderful.
And so smart.
And so smart.
And inventive.
Yeah, totally. I worked on a play years ago by Naomi Iizuka, and I'm also super influenced by her because I think she's formally very inventive and really interesting. I'm leaving out all kinds of people whose work I admire.
Very lucky audiences in South Minneapolis will get to experience Michi's drawing lessons starting October 8th.
Yay! Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this edition of Backstage Pass with Leah Chang. Until next time.